Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hello, I am back today with a really great guest. I had the pleasure of interviewing Mitch Cobb, who is the co-founder and CEO at Upstreet Brewing and Libra non-alcoholic craft beer. And Mitch's brewery is on Prince Edward Island, which is actually really close to my home province of Nova Scotia. And the Libra alcohol-free beer is one of my favorite alcohol-free beers, and I have tried a lot now. So I was really delighted to be able to have this conversation with Mitch about the alcohol-free movement and also the alcohol-free drinks industry and how it has just been growing exponentially in the last couple of years. So it's a really, really interesting conversation. Whether you're a drinker or not, I think you're going to love this conversation. And, you know, Mitch is really passionate about the idea of just giving people an option to drink something non-alcoholic. Sometimes, and just this idea of, making sure that you have an option that actually tastes great if there is a time that you don't feel like drinking alcoholic beer or it doesn't serve you. And anyway, it was just a really great conversation. So please enjoy it. Before we get to that conversation, I had a couple of little announcements I wanted to make. I always forget to do this when I'm recording podcasts, so I'm reminding myself today to do this. First of all, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I appreciate every single one of you, and I love getting your emails and texts and DMs about how you're enjoying the episodes, and I love getting your suggestions for episode topics and guests. So please keep those coming. You can always email me. I'm always happy to receive feedback. So please send that to me anytime. And if you have not yet taken the time to post a review on iTunes for this podcast or the platform that you listen to this podcast on, I would so appreciate it if you would just take a minute to do that. It makes such a big difference when it comes to this podcast actually reaching more women. And it also really helps me when I'm trying to book, maybe busier guests on this podcast. So if you haven't done that yet, you can just go and throw up a starred review. And if you have time to just pop like a sentence or two in about what you love most about the podcast, what your favorite episode was, or, anything you have to say that might encourage someone else to listen to this podcast and these episodes, I would really, really appreciate it. Second thing I want to say is this. I get a lot of questions after podcast episodes about my coaching practice and what I do as a coach. And it's not something that I talk about a lot on this podcast, but I wanted to just take a minute and kind of tell you guys what it is I do. So I basically am a burnout and alcohol coach for professional women. That is, I would say, 90% of the work that I do. Sometimes I work with women who are in burnout who are not using alcohol as their coping mechanism of choice. They're very often using something else. But most of the women that I work with have those two common denominators in that they are completely overwhelmed and stressed with their incredibly busy and successful lives, and they are also using alcohol too often to cope with that. And there are all kinds of different ways that I support women. So I am always coaching women privately. So a portion of my practice is a private one-on-one coaching practice. You can work with me one-on-one. In order to do that, you need to apply because I'm busy and I often have a wait list. So what I recommend you do if you're interested in coaching is go onto my website, which is just wendymccallum.com, and you'll see buttons everywhere to fill out a coaching application. If you do that, I'll get back to you and I'll let you know whether I have space in my practice right now, and I will set up a discovery call with you, a free discovery call if from your application it seems like you'd be a great fit for the private coaching. I also, though, have group programming that I run regularly, and depending on the time of year, there are different programs running. So, for example, in January, I ran a Rewind Drink Less program with my friend and co-certified coach, Emily Lynn Paulson, who lives in Oregon. And that was a huge success. We will be running that again, I expect. But that is not something that's always running as a coach-led program. However, you can always register for the Rewind program as a self-led program. So that is a fantastic 6-week program where you get a daily video lesson from me or Emily every day for the 6-week period. And you also get all kinds of resource tools and support around taking a mindful break from alcohol and actually shifting your underlying thought patterns around drinking so that you can achieve some permanent change once your experiment period is over. So again, that is a self-guided rewind. It's always available. So if you can't find it on my website, send me an email and I will point you in the direction of that. I also, as many of you probably know, sometimes run programming with Dr. Sarah Bailey, who's a naturopathic doctor, also group programming. We have run a program called WTF, which stands for Women Talking Frankly, but also what you thought it stood for. And it's all about the intersection of burnout, midlife, and hormones for women, and how that can really become problematic for us, and how we can start understanding better what's actually happening in our bodies in perimenopause and menopause, and also making some changes to the way we live that support us better in terms of our mental health and our physical health and just generally our balance. And so that program is also sometimes running. If you're curious about that, you can also message me around that. There's a wait list going in the times when we're not actively running that program. So those are just a couple of the group programs that I run. I also have a small group coaching circle for women around alcohol. That is very limited in terms of spots. It's often full. And generally speaking, many of the women in that group have actually coached with me privately and then moved into that group as alumni for continuing support once they're finished with their private coaching with me. But that group is an option for some women. It is made up of, again, the type of women that I work with most, which is successful women, largely women with careers who are really overwhelmed and busy. Not all moms, but many moms who are also trying to balance caregiving with careers, and who are drinking too much and want to change their relationship with alcohol. So lots of stuff available is my point. And I just wanted to let everybody know what it is I actually do for a living, because this podcast is really for fun. And of course, I talk about a lot of the stuff that I coach on and coach around in my practice, but I wanted to share that with you. So that's a little bit about me. Thanks again for listening to this podcast. I hope you really enjoy this episode with Mitch of Libra alcohol-free craft beer. Hi, Mitch. I am so glad to have you here.
Hey, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
This is really exciting for me because I'm sort of fanning out on the whole Libra brand, which is an alcohol-free beer. We're going to talk a lot about it, but it's an alcohol-free beer that's actually produced pretty locally to where I am. We've got listeners all over the place on this podcast, but here in Nova Scotia, there's just, for a very long time, was very little selection when it came to alcohol-free beer, and definitely not local stuff. So you are, your brewery is on Prince Edward Island, which is one of the Atlantic provinces, and very geographically fairly close to me. So I was super excited to discover that. And I'm really, really glad to have you here. I would love to start, Mitch, with just your story. How do you come to start a brewery? I mean, what's your background and how did you get to the brewery stage? Because it started first with an alcohol, like a sort of regular typical brewery where you're brewing beer that contained alcohol. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you started this Libra line, which is the alcohol-free line. How did you get to the decision to start a brewery? Where does that come from?
Okay. Yeah. So, Upstreet, we started in 2015. So pretty much almost 7 years ago. And it's a bit of a long story as to how we got there. I never really expected to be running a brewery. That was never really part of my career plan. In fact, prior to opening up the brewery, I was teaching at Holland College in the business program. And then prior to that, I had worked more in like community education, but had always had sort of an interest in entrepreneurship. And was doing my MBA and was learning in doing my MBA about social enterprise and about companies that were B Corp certified, and like Ben and Jerry's and Patagonia and all of these companies that had a real strong social purpose in addition to being profitable companies. And so that really kind of piqued my interest in entrepreneurship, because it was this real sort of light bulb moment of where, these two opposite ends of the spectrum of like community work and entrepreneurship or businesses could kind of come together and coexist. So with that kind of in the back of my mind, I had a good friend, Mike Hogan, who was an avid home brewer, and me and some friends would always go over and help him on Sundays with his home brewing and enjoy his beer. The conversation sort of started over some beers about how much fun it would be to start our own brewery. At the time he was a computer software engineer. And so, it was sort of like living one of those dreams where we quit our kind of corporate jobs and start our own brewery. And the conversation kind of progressed so far that we couldn't really turn back. And before you knew it, we were leaving our jobs and starting Upstreet.
So cool. So can you tell everybody what a B Corp is? Because I think there'll be lots of people listening who won't know what that means.
Yeah. So B Corp is a certification process for businesses. I guess you would kind of compare it to like what organic is for vegetables or what fair trade is for coffee. So it's a certification process that businesses go through that assesses, it's a pretty broad assessment, but basically looks at your environmental sustainability, your impact on the community, your impact on employees, your impact on your supply chain. You go through this process, where at the end, if you get a certain number of points in these categories, you become B Corp certified. So, it's definitely growing. We were the first B Corp certified company on PEI. We're still the only B Corp certified company on PEI, actually. There's now, I think, 14 B Corp certified companies in Atlantic Canada. But there are some big companies that are part of the B Corp movement, like Ben and Jerry's, like Patagonia, Danone is a big one. Bose Brewery out of Ontario is B Corp certified. So yeah, and for us, it's people always ask, what are the benefits of being a B Corp certified company? And for us, it's I guess it provides sort of a guidepost, so to speak. It kind of holds us accountable to operating at a certain standard. It doesn't allow us to, so to speak, greenwash, the things that we're doing. So, it's really important to how we operate our business.
Yeah, no, it adds credibility and just some authenticity, I think, to the brand. And I think it's so fantastic that you're doing that. And congratulations on being the only B Corp on PEI. I didn't know that. So you and Mike started Upstreet, which was just a brewery, just a regular brewery. And then at some point you start thinking about trying to make a beer without alcohol in it. What prompted that?
Yeah. So, like I said, we launched Upstreet in 2015 and we grew really, really quickly across PEI and then across Atlantic Canada. We had our tap room that we opened when we opened the brewery. The next year we opened a second location, a bar in downtown Charlottetown. And then a year after that, we opened a brewery and restaurant in Halifax. So, kind of 3 years into owning two breweries and three restaurants, I had sort of hit a wall, and just, I was living the lifestyle of someone who owned three restaurants and two breweries, and was drinking a lot of beer, was eating out a lot, and was just feeling not on top of my game. I gained 50 pounds, and so I decided, kind of like 6 months before my 40th birthday. I don't even know where it came from. I was just like, you know what, I'm going to lose 40 pounds before my 40th birthday. And so I was like, you know what, the first thing I'm going to have to do is stop drinking craft beer. And so that was sort of what started the light bulb moment for me, you know, is because once I kind of cut out craft beer and then kind of eventually cut out alcohol altogether, you know, I still wanted to go out with friends, and I still wanted to have all of those social experiences that I was having before. But there was just nothing available at restaurants, and there wasn't really any products that I could find that kind of satisfied that craft beer itch. So, you know, it really kind of got us thinking about like, what would it take to create a non-alcoholic craft beer? And it took probably 2 years of research and development and trying different methods before we finally landed on a process that, you know, we feel really captured all of the flavor and spirit of craft beer, just without any alcohol.
Yeah, it's so delicious. For anyone who's listening, I can't say enough. I know I'm raving. There's no endorsement here, by the way. I just really love this beer, which is why I reached out to Libra and asked if someone would be willing to come on this podcast, because I think this is such a great story. I think we need more of this. And this beer is so good. And I think, you know, many of my listeners know that I don't drink anymore, but my husband still drinks, and he really is a beer drinker. That's what he likes. He doesn't drink very often, but when he does, it's beer, and he loves this beer. So you have a variety. There are, how many different types now are there of alcohol-free beer that you make with Libra?
Yeah, so right now we have 4 flagships. So we launched initially with our pale ale. That was last October. And then this summer we launched an IPA. And then this fall we launched a Pilsner. And most recently, which will be coming out right in time for dry January, is a stout.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The IPA is our favorite, but we also like the pale, and I have not tried the Pilsner or the stout, so I will do that. So I just love this story. So the thing that, when you're talking, the thing that is resonating with me that I want to focus in on is the fact that you recognize that in order to get healthier and have a better balance in your life, you needed to drink less alcohol. And, you know, you were looking for something that would allow you to still enjoy all the social activities that traditionally involve alcohol. And there wasn't anything out there. So you decided to do it yourself, which I think is awesome, filling that void. And this is really, you know, this is a trend that we're seeing now in terms of, I'm sure that even since you started with your alcohol-free line, that you've seen just a huge change in the market. It's just been insane. Like, as somebody who is a consumer of this, 4 years ago when I stopped drinking, the only beer I could find was Beck's. That was it. Not my favorite. But it was the only thing out there. And then occasionally I could find Erdinger, which I think is German or something, but that, you know, there was nothing local. And now there's a lot out there, not a lot locally, like I said, but there's a lot out there, and the Canadian market seems to have blown up as well. So what have you noticed in that regard?
Yeah, you know what? It's been amazing to watch over the last couple of years, even from, you know, when we started experimenting and going into the R&D process. There's been so many new products come out, and in a range of areas. So, you know, the non-alcoholic beer category is exploding. The non-alcoholic spirit category is exploding. The non-alcoholic RTD category is exploding. You know, I mean, it's really exciting. And I think, you know, it's really being driven by, you know, a sort of a move towards health and wellness, and being driven by younger generations. You know, I mean, any of the statistics that, you know, I see on a regular basis are that, you know, Gen Z, younger millennials are drinking less, you know, and there's a number of reasons for that, but a lot of it has to do with health and wellness and just access to information and recognition, you know, of the impact that drinking has on your health and wellness. And so, you know, I think that is sort of driving the category, but then there's all this really interesting innovation that has started happening in the last couple of years as well. And so you kind of have this perfect storm of like new companies entering into the marketplace and this appetite for new products, which is really driving innovation and pushing the category forward. Where for like years and years and years, the non-alcoholic beer category anyway, just like stayed exactly the same. There was never any growth. There was never any, and it was always sort of non-alcoholic beer was always perceived as a product for, people who couldn't drink because they had issues with alcohol or for health reasons. And we're seeing those lines really start to blur now.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. It used to be for like pregnant women and alcoholics and designated drivers. And I feel like that market has just broadened so greatly. And, I obviously help a lot of people stop drinking altogether, but I'm also a big fan of like any change is great change. And so for people who are listening to the podcast who've been drinking more during the pandemic, I've probably said this 3,000 times in the last year of episodes. You're not alone. Drinking has spiked during the pandemic, especially with women. And it is totally okay to just drink a little less because you don't like where you are. And it does not mean that you are, you're an alcoholic or even that your drinking is objectively problematic. It's totally okay to just choose to drink less if that makes you feel better. And I think that the broadening of this market and these alternatives that are now available, that it's blowing my mind how much is available. Like I could throw a whole cocktail party and make some, hundreds of different drinks with all of the stuff that is now in my alcohol-free liquor cabinet. And 4 years ago, like I said, 4 years ago when I stopped, I remember it was like, what am I going to drink when I watch football on Sundays? I guess it's going to be Beck's. And now it's, it can be whatever I want. So I love that it's opened up like this. And I think it's normalizing the conversation around not drinking just because you don't want to drink as much, and starting to accept and embrace the idea that you get to drink less if you want. And in the normalizing of that conversation, what's happening, this is the coolest thing I think about all of this, is that it's the stigma around not drinking is dissipating. And that's the piece that I think is just the most exciting thing about all of this, is that it's that stigma that was there even 4 years ago. For me is not there anymore, because so many people are enjoying alcohol-free drinks when they go out, just because they want to. And maybe they drink beverages with alcohol in them at other times, but it doesn't feel like you're labeling yourself if you go out and choose to have an alcohol-free drink at a bar or a party or whatever else.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And we see it a lot in the tap room and even in the liquor stores here on PEI, where like the line in the sand is gone. And typically people are coming into the tap room and they're purchasing, 4 or 6 beer, and then they're grabbing 4 non-alcoholic beer, and whether they're taking those out to a party and, interspersing non-alcoholic beer with their beer, or whether they're choosing to like not drink during the week, or, there's all sorts of reasons. And as the innovation and the beverages start to taste better, then, it kind of just doesn't make sense to want to drink alcohol all the time, and that stigma absolutely gets removed. Yeah. I find it really like on PEI. So PEI's got some funny rules that they're in the process of changing, and I'll try and spare you from getting into the details, but basically Libra has to be sold through the liquor stores on PEI because there is 0.4% alcohol. And so anything over 0.0 is considered alcoholic on PEI, even though CFIA considers it non-alcoholic. It's
interesting, like because it's, sorry to interrupt, but I feel like in Nova Scotia, the liquor stores are not allowed to sell non-alcoholic beverages. So you can't, like, I've never seen it there. And I asked one time and was told, like, we can't sell. And by most non-alcoholic beer has small amounts of alcohol in it, like the same amount of alcohol as you would find in a ripe banana, for example. But if it's under, I think it's 0.505 maybe here. it's considered non-alcoholic. Is there a standard for that? Like in terms of marketing, is it 0.05 that you would consider it?
Yeah, it's 0.5.
Okay, I'm sorry, 0.5
is typically what most non-alcoholic beers. Now, CFIA classifies anything under 1% as non-alcoholic, but the sort of standard is under 0.5. Yeah, so it is interesting, because we have talked to the NSLC about carrying Libra, and we will be. There's a lot of other liquor commissions that are starting to carry more non-alcoholic products. And it's sort of one of those things where, we're kind of so far behind, we're ahead on PEI. But it's been really interesting because Libra consistently has been, not only have we grown our market share of non-alcoholic beer in the category, where now 40% of non-alcoholic beer sold through the liquor commissions is Libra, but it also is one of our top 5 selling beer SKUs in the liquor store, which is incredible, right? Yeah. It's a really good case study of for other liquor commissions to say, people aren't coming in just to buy non-alcoholic beer or alcoholic beer or products. They're really wanting to buy both.
Right. Oh, that is really interesting. I know one of the things that I hear sometimes from people is why is this so expensive? Why do I have to pay so much for non-alcoholic wine or non-alcoholic beer or not these non-alcoholic spirits? Why do they cost the same? And I've talked to different people about this. So I know the answer, but I would love it if you would just talk about how you make alcohol-free beer and what is involved in the process of that, because the value is not in the actual alcohol. The alcohol's cheap. I always say to people, alcohol's cheap. It's in the gasoline we put in our cars. Ethanol's cheap. It's the process that's required to make something that tastes delicious, whether it has alcohol in it or not. I think that is what contributes to the market price for it, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that statement. The value is not in the alcohol. I'm going to be using that from now on, because it absolutely isn't. It really is in the ingredients and in the process. And so, when we make our non-alcoholic beers, we make them exactly the same way that we make our alcoholic beers. We put them through the same process. We just make small tweaks along the process, adjust the temperatures, adjust the times, so that the beer only ends up fermenting out to 0.4%. But really, the length of time it takes to make a non-alcoholic beer is 2.5 to 3 weeks, the same as our regular beer. And the inputs into the non-alcoholic beer are the same in terms of the hops, the malt, and the yeast. And then of course the packaging, which is always the expense of any product. So it really is, the craft of making non-alcoholic beer is exactly the same as regular beer.
So it's not, so I guess that this is actually, I hadn't thought about this, but when you see something that says de-alcoholized, then there's been another step taken where the alcohol's been removed, but that's not happening with your Libra beer, because you're just controlling the amount of alcohol produced in the process, in the fermentation process. So there is no removing of alcohol that happens with your beer.
Exactly. Yep. So there's a couple of different ways. Traditionally, non-alcoholic beer was made by making beer and then boiling off the alcohol. Right. But in boiling off the alcohol, you boiled off all of the flavor as well, right, and kind of burnt out all of the aroma and flavor that would come from the beer, which is why traditionally non-alcoholic beers haven't tasted that good. Right. In the last few years, there's been a lot of innovation in de-alkalizing equipment. So you can use a vacuum distillation, which doesn't heat the beer up to a high temperature, but is able to extract the alcohol, or through reverse osmosis. And those methods will also de-alkalize the beer. But with our process, we just kind of made adjustments along the way, so that there's never any alcohol in it to begin with.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that before, because I've seen the de-alcoholized on the labels before, but now I'm thinking maybe that's why I didn't like those beers that shall remain somewhat unnamed that I've already called out. They were probably de-alcoholized. Okay. So, Another thing that I wanted to talk about that I think is really cool is that you've partnered with Serena Ryder, there'll be a lot of people listening to this podcast, first of all, who don't know what PEI is. So let me just tell you, PEI is Prince Edward Island, which is one of the Canadian provinces. And it is actually an island. So we say on PEI instead of in PEI. And Serena Ryder is a very, very well-known Canadian music artist. And you guys have partnered with her. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So Serena is, like you said, she's a well-known Canadian musician, 5-time Juno Award winner. And so we have been working on this partnership for a while, and it was really, I don't know, it was really serendipitous how the whole thing came about. We were doing some influencer marketing and had recognized that she had stopped drinking. So we sent her some samples and hoping that she would maybe like post about it on her Instagram or something. And her team came back kind of out of the blue and was like, she loves the product and she'd really like to partner. And so, Serena has been very, over the last couple of years, very vocal about her mental wellness journey, and wrote an album, her last album, The Art of Falling Apart, about that, her kind of mental health struggles. And part of that was, choosing not to consume alcohol. So 3 years ago, she decided to stop drinking. And so, there was, I guess, like a really good alignment there. And so her team came back and said they wanted to partner. And, the more we started talking, the more, we kind of realized how closely our values aligned in terms of what we were doing with Upstreet and B Corp and with Libra, and trying to normalize the conversation around alcohol and help people find their balance and encourage moderation, and what she was doing in the music industry and talking about mental wellness and alcohol consumption. And so, it just sort of all came together, and it's really exciting for us because, really what we want to do is start a conversation in Canada and in North America around normalizing not drinking, and to really become the beverage of choice at music festivals and at venues and at restaurants in Canada. And so she was also very much aligned with that. I mean, that was kind of one of her, biggest complaints, or is playing shows or going to these venues and not having any options. And that's kind of where we're going. So it's an exciting partnership. We're really happy to be working with her and her team because they're just really amazing, down to earth people. And yeah.
That is so great. Yeah. I have not had a non-alcoholic beer at a concert ever. I was on a golf course this summer with my husband. I do not golf, but I was on a golf course and the guys in front of us bought us a round of beer, I guess, from the golf cart because they were holding us up a little bit, not that we cared. And the golf cart lady came around and I just said, hey, any chance you have something in there that's non-alcoholic? And she happened to, but my experience is that at most places it's not there. It's not available, but I always ask. And the reason I ask is because if you don't ask for it, they're not going to bring it in. And so it's a practice of mine when I go to a restaurant to ask them what they have in terms of non-alcoholic beer. I ask at almost every restaurant I go to. And one thing I've noticed lately, which is really cool, is that a lot of the Halifax restaurants, if I ask them, will say we have Libra, which is exciting to us because we love it. And we always get it if it's available. And so I encourage you, if you're listening to this podcast and you want more options when you go to restaurants and bars, start asking for it. And sometimes I'll even say, I'll go to the bartender and I'll say, you should really think about getting some non-alcoholic options on your menu. I mean, they can always make mocktails and whatever, but and I'll give them suggestions for beer. I have done this with Libra recently. Like, why don't you have it? Because it's local, you're a local restaurant. Why don't you carry this? So I encourage anyone who's listening, who is trying to drink less, or maybe doesn't drink at all. If you're frustrated with the lack of selection anywhere you go, whether it's a concert or a restaurant or a bar or, any other place where alcohol might be served, I really encourage you to go and make a specific request it's starting to make a difference. I think it's starting to shift. I'm seeing it. So I'd love to see it everywhere. And I love the fact that Serena's thinking about alcohol-free beverages at concerts. That's just like mind blowing to me, because if I think back to my youth, I was never sober at a concert. So I think that's so fantastic.
No, it's great. And I would echo that too. It is. And I feel like it's going to change at restaurants and at venues in the next couple of years. I think that we've seen the non-alcoholic category grow through COVID, and while people were at home and restaurants have struggled, and as restaurants sort of emerge and look to start kind of growing sales and broadening their customer base, it's going to be harder and harder for them to ignore.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm looking forward to that. And I would also say, like, another little tip for anyone who's listening, especially, we're by the time this podcast airs, it'll be post holidays, but right now we're just pre-holidays as we record this. Such a nice thing to just have some non-alcoholic beer around for the people who don't drink, or something else, but like a nice non-alcoholic drink. It means so much to me when I go to someone's house and they can actually offer me something from the fridge that's cold, that's nice, that's not alcoholic. I always bring my own anyway, but just a thought, have this stuff on hand. It's so good. And maybe you'll like it. Maybe you try it and you like it. And I love what you were saying before, Mitch, this idea of, it doesn't need to be, I'm not going to drink alcohol at all anymore. And in fact, I think most of the people who are buying the non-alcoholic beers still drink alcohol. That's my understanding from the statistics. I might be wrong on that. But it's totally okay to only drink non-alcoholic during the week, like during the weekdays, or, only have one alcoholic drink and then have non-alcoholic drinks after that. It's a great transition strategy if you're looking to cut back or maybe eventually stop drinking altogether. And it's just healthier than having all the alcoholic drinks. So I think that's so great. So what's next for you guys? Where are you going from here? What are you hoping for with Libra?
Oh, wow. All kinds.
No pressure.
So, we're really focused on growing our distribution of Libra. Absolutely. Right now it's available in all 10 provinces in Canada, which is really exciting for us to have distribution right across the country. And so now it's, kind of working to, again, kind of get better market penetration and really focus on, I love music festivals. I love going out to live shows. I love going out to restaurants. So I really want to see Libra in all of those spaces, exactly for what you said. I want to go out and be able to enjoy a drink or a non-alcoholic drink. But also it's such an interesting category to be in, especially after being in the beer business for a few years. You've sort of tried everything. And so this is just presenting Libra is really presenting us all sorts of new challenges on the innovation front. So, we have our 4 flagships so far. We're working on our 5th flagship, which will be coming out in the spring. And then those will be kind of our 5 core beer. And then we really want to start innovating in the space and seeing how we can push the limits of what a non-alcoholic beer can be. And so we're really excited about that. I think it's going to be really interesting. We're not really taking the approach of we're going to have 1 or 2 non-alcoholic beers in addition to all of our alcoholic products. We really want Libra to grow into its own thing that's probably at a certain point in the next few years will be bigger than Upstreet is, I suspect.
I love that. I think that's so great. And there's such a need for it. So we talked about so on PEI, you have to get it at the liquor stores. Mm-hmm. In Nova Scotia, you can't get it at the liquor store, but you can get it. I just found out before we started recording, which I'm very excited about, because I was saying to Mitch before I press record that I have ordered this from the brewery. I'm assuming it's coming from the island, and had it shipped here. We ordered, I think it was 24. Possibly I possibly convinced him to get 48. I cannot remember, but my husband ordered all of this online because we tried it in a restaurant, loved it. And after, by the way, I have a client in PEI who loves it and recommended it to me. That's how I first tried it. And we got this, it all arrives at our door. We're all excited. We got all these 2 huge boxes of beer. He puts it all in this cupboard. He says, oh my God, we're officially non-alcoholic alcoholics now, because there's this like huge cabinet of non-alcoholic beer and it's all gone. He drank it in not even 2 weeks, I think. I can't remember how much we had, but it was a lot of non-alcoholic beer that he drank in those 2 weeks. And we were talking about this and you were telling me that you can actually buy it here now. So for those listeners who are in the HRM, so the Halifax area, where can you get it here?
Yeah, so you can get it at Bishop's Cellar and Harvest, like the private alcohol stores in Halifax, and it's also available in Sobeys throughout Atlantic Canada. It's available at Coleman's in Newfoundland, and it's available at the PEI Liquor Commission stores here on PEI. And you can also order it online from drinklibra.ca and well.ca.
Right. It's worth trying, you guys. If you like beer, it's really, really good. It's the IPA is the best IPA I've ever had. That's non-alcoholic, and I've tried a lot. And there are lots of really good ones out there, but this one for sure is my favorite, and it's local. So give it a shot. And like I said, if it's not somewhere where you wish it was, ask them if they can bring it in. And the last thing I wanted to say, Mitch, this is like I have a personal bee in my bonnet about this. It can't be me, you guys. I'm too busy. I have too much to do, but somebody needs to open a non-alcoholic liquor store. We need a specialty store in Nova Scotia, preferably in Halifax, so that I can get to it easily, but a store that sells all of this stuff where it's all together so that people can see the incredible selection that we have now. I mean, we're talking about beer on this podcast, but Mitch mentioned non-alcoholic spirits. I mean, there are just, some of them are so good. And most of them now we need to order online. So a lot of them aren't Canadian. So I'm having to order them from the States and I'm paying massive duty on it and they're hard to get here and all the rest of it. But this is a great business idea for someone, not me. Yep, I think it would be so great if we had one. And I've got a friend who started Denver's first alcohol-free bar. I also think we need an alcohol-free bar. They're all over the States now. And I long to see them across Canada. But in the meantime, this idea of a blended bar is so fantastic to me, where you can go with your friends who still want to drink alcohol and drink something non-alcoholic and not feel like you're sticking out like a sore thumb. Just feel like this is normal. And it's just a positive wellness choice and nothing more than that. So thank you so much, Mitch. This is so great. Love talking to you today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, I wish you the best of luck with this product, as you can tell. I'm a fan.
Thank you.
I'm a fan, and I just love to see local companies that have I just think you have such a great, your tagline, which we didn't talk about for Libra, is find your balance. And, that really resonates with me as a burnout and balance coach. This is what I do. And I love this mission to normalize the conversation about not drinking. I just think it's so important. And I love to see industry, especially local industry, get involved in that conversation. It's fantastic. So thanks for everything you're doing and best of luck in 2022. I can't believe I'm saying that. By the time this airs, I guess it'll be 2022. Holy cow. And I look forward to seeing where all of this takes you.
All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.